I paid a guy to be my boyfriend. But now his mom is planning for our wedding and I don't think I can leave. My ex was getting married to the woman he cheated on me with, and I was invited. Now most people would turn it down because they're sane, but I couldn't. You see, my ex Brian had invited my entire friend group from college to the wedding. He knew everyone had partners, except me. So he wanted to show everyone that nobody could love me one last time. What he didn't know was that he'd be getting the exact opposite of that. After I vented about it, my roommate suggested I find someone from a rental dating app. It's just like hiring a photographer or a DJ, she said. You're hiring a service. And they're all very professional with clear rules. The app was full of attractive people willing to be your +1 for events. $500 for a weekend. Professional actors who'd make you look good and disappear afterward. I ended up choosing a gorgeous guy named Kobe, who had a Harvard MBA, rescue dogs, and a jawline that I knew would make my ex Brian jealous. He sent me a form to fill out asking for pages of information on me, from my favorite color to secrets only couples would know. We made up an elaborate story about how we had met romantically at a park when one of his rescue dogs got loose and ran straight for me, and how for him it was love at first sight. Kobe was incredibly professional. And honestly, it made me wonder just how many clients he'd dealt with. I sent him half the money through Zelle, and he showed up to my apartment the morning of the wedding, somehow looking even better than the photos. He brought me a corsage that matched my dress. Ready to go? He smiled. Honestly, no, I told him, laughing. He reached out and held my hand, leading me out to his Lexus. He kept holding my hand even during the ceremony, with his thumb tracing small circles on the back. He whispered jokes during boring parts and kept checking on me during the exchange of vows, making sure I was fine. And I hate to admit it, but Kobe was good. Really, really good at his job. Even at the reception, he managed to charm everyone. He got my college friends laughing about stories from our relationship that he'd improvised on the spot. He got my shy friends to dance and even debated politics with the older guests there. Even the bride kept her eyes on him, blown away by his jawline and perfect hair. And Brian watched it all with a tortured stare that practically healed me from the whole cheating incident. Kobe pulled me out to slow dance with him, whispering in my ear, "Let's make them all jealous." But none of that was on my mind anymore. All I could focus on was the way his heart raced just as fast as mine, and I wondered if maybe there was something more between us. About the no falling in love rule, I started to mention, but the ringing of his phone interrupted it. Kobe smiled and apologized, picking it up, only for his face to turn completely pale and rigid. His mom sobbed on the other end of the line, telling him that his father had just collapsed. When he hung up, I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed his car keys and started dragging him out of the venue. The 40-minute drive was silent, like we were suddenly strangers again. We sprinted into the hospital and made it to the room just before they dragged his father into surgery. His mom held my hand, tears still spilling from her eyes. "Thank God you're here. Kobe told us all about you." My heart skipped a beat. Kobe told them about me? Why? I glanced over at him while his mother kept saying how he'd undersold me, how beautiful I was, how happy she was to finally meet me even though she wished it was under better circumstances. I pulled Kobe to an emptier hallway away from the waiting room. "You told your family about me?" I asked. Kobe ran his hands through his hair and apologized. "I know it's unprofessional. I know the rules. But those nights we spent chatting, sharing stories and memes, I started to really like you, and I thought I could ask you out after the whole wedding thing was over," he explained. "I was selfish, and now I dragged you into an even bigger mess." Before I could say anything, the light in the OR suddenly shut off. His dad's surgery was finally finished. Kobe and I rushed over to the room. His dad was conscious, but his eyes were still unfocused. He reached out and squeezed my hand, whispering, "Beautiful. Take care of my boy." I felt my own tears threaten to fall, but all of this was wrong. It was a lie. I had hired Kobe to date me to make my own ex feel bad, and now his family thinks we're something real, and it didn't sit well with me. I slowly tried to exit the hospital, hoping to slip out without anyone noticing, but just as I reached the entrance, Kobe caught my wrist, gently pulling me towards his warm chest. His arms wrapped around me, and I could feel his chest moving fast with each breath. He pressed his forehead against mine and whispered if I could please stay just a bit longer, just until his dad woke up enough to know what was happening. His voice cracked on the last word, and I saw something in his eyes that had nothing to do with our arrangement or the money I'd paid him. He looked scared in a way that made my own chest hurt. I heard myself say yes before I could think about it. We walked back through the automatic doors and down the long hallway to the ICU waiting room. His mom spotted us immediately and reached for my hand the second we sat down. She squeezed my fingers and told me how grateful she was that Kobe had found someone like me. Someone who would drop everything and rush to a hospital without thinking twice. She kept saying how rare that was and how lucky her son was. Every word made the guilt sit heavier in my chest until I could barely breathe under the weight of it. The clock on the wall showed 2 a.m. when a nurse in blue scrubs came out to update us. She said Kobe's dad was resting well and his vital signs were getting better. His mom started crying again, but this time from relief instead of fear. She insisted that Kobe and I try to sleep in the waiting room chairs since it would be hours before we could see him again. She pulled off her own jacket and draped it over my shoulders like I was already part of the family, The jacket smelled like lavender, and I had to bite my lip to keep from crying myself. I settled into one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs and closed my eyes, even though I knew sleep wouldn't come. But somehow it did come because I woke up when early morning light started coming through the windows. My head was on Kobe's shoulder and his arm was wrapped around me. For just a second, I forgot this whole thing was fake. For just a second, it felt like I was waking up next to someone who actually cared about me. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket and shattered the moment. 3 texts from my roommate asking if I was okay, asking why I never came home from the wedding, reminding me that the event was supposed to be over now. Reality crashed back so hard I actually felt dizzy. Kobe's mom woke up a few minutes later and sent us to get coffee and breakfast from the cafeteria. She said we needed to take care of ourselves and that she'd text if anything changed. She smiled at us like we were a real couple who needed a break together. Kobe and I walked to the elevator without saying anything. We stepped inside and the doors closed, and suddenly we were alone in that tiny metal box. The silence felt so heavy I thought it might crush us both. We both knew we were trapped in a lie that was getting bigger with every hour. Every kind word from his mom made it worse. I stared at the floor numbers lighting up and tried not to think about how we were going to get out of this mess. The cafeteria coffee tasted like dirty water, but I drank it anyway because I needed something to do with my hands. We sat at a table in the corner away from the other people. Kobe ran his hands through his hair and apologized again for putting me in this position. He said we should tell his mom the truth today. Just rip the band-aid off and deal with the consequences. I opened my mouth to agree, but different words came out instead. I said we should wait until his dad was stronger. That dropping this bomb during a medical crisis felt wrong and cruel. Kobe stared at me with this look on his face like he couldn't believe what I'd just said. Like I was someone completely different from he expected. The look made something flutter in my stomach that I absolutely did not want to feel. We headed back upstairs and found out Kobe's dad was awake and asking for us. A nurse led us to his room and we walked in to find him sitting up slightly in the bed. He looked tired and pale, but his eyes were clear. He smiled when he saw us and told Kobe how lucky he was to have found me. He made Kobe promise right there to hold on to someone who shows up when it matters, who doesn't run away when things get hard. His words hit me like a punch to the gut because I had literally just tried to run away an hour ago. I mumbled something about needing the bathroom and practically ran out of the room. I locked myself in the single stall and leaned against the door trying to catch my breath. My phone rang and I saw my roommate's name on the screen. I answered and she immediately asked what the hell was going on. I told her everything that happened since we left the wedding reception. About the phone call and the hospital and meeting his parents and the lie that kept getting bigger. She listened to the whole story and then said I was in way over my head now. That this stopped being a simple business deal the moment I got in that car with him. I wanted to argue, but I knew she was right. I couldn't seem to make myself walk away, even though every logical part of my brain was screaming at me to leave. I hung up and saw a notification from the rental app. An automated message reminding me that my event had concluded, asking me to please rate my experience and provide feedback. I stared at the screen and realized I was now breaking the terms of service. I was still pretending to be Kobe's date even though the contracted event was over. I was representing myself as his girlfriend to his family, and that violated everything in the agreement I'd signed. I closed the app without responding because I had no idea what to say. I forced myself to leave the bathroom and walk back to the hospital room. Kobe's mom had her phone out and was showing Kobe something on the screen. When I sat down, she turned the phone toward me. Photos of Kobe as a kid. She scrolled through them, telling me stories about his childhood like I was going to be around for years to hear them all. She told me about his first day of school and his obsession with dinosaurs and the time he tried to bring home a stray cat. Each story made me feel worse about the lie, but it also made me understand him better. I found myself actually wanting to know more about him, wanting to know the real person behind the perfect fake date performance. And that scared me more than anything else that had happened in the past 12 hours. A nurse walked into the room carrying a clipboard and asked if I was family. I opened my mouth to say no, but Kobe's mom jumped in before I could get the words out. She told the nurse I was Kobe's girlfriend and they should include me in all the medical updates about his father. The nurse nodded and made a note on her chart, writing something down that made this lie feel permanent and official. I watched her pen move across the paper and realized our fake relationship was now part of hospital records, documented in a way that made it harder to take back. Kobe squeezed my hand, but I couldn't look at him because the weight of what we were doing felt too heavy. Later that afternoon, Kobe suggested we take a walk to get some air. We left his mom with his dad and headed outside to the hospital grounds where there were benches and a small garden area. The sun felt warm on my face after being under those harsh fluorescent lights for so long. Kobe started talking about his dad's health history, how he'd had a minor heart attack 2 years ago and was supposed to be watching his diet and stress levels. His voice got quiet when he admitted how scared he was when his mom called during the wedding, how he thought he might lose his dad before getting to say goodbye. I found myself sharing about my grandmother who died last year, how I wasn't there when it happened because I was at work and couldn't get to the hospital in time. We walked slowly around the garden path and it hit me that this was the first real conversation we'd had that wasn't about the fake dating setup or making my ex jealous. He asked questions about my grandmother and actually listened to my answers instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. I told him about her garden and how she taught me to bake cookies, and he smiled and said his dad taught him to fix cars even though he was terrible at it. The conversation felt easy and natural, like we were actual friends instead of two people caught in a mess of lies. Kobe's phone rang while we were sitting on a bench near the hospital entrance. His mom's name flashed on the screen and he answered immediately, his whole body going tense like he expected bad news. But she just needed us to pick up some items from their house for his dad. She gave Kobe detailed directions about where to find his dad's reading glasses, his favorite pillow, and some clothes for when he could change out of the hospital gown. Kobe wrote everything down in his phone notes while she talked. When he hung up, we headed to the parking lot and got in his car. The drive to his childhood home took about 20 minutes and neither of us talked much. I stared out the window watching the neighborhoods change from commercial areas near the hospital to quiet residential streets with big trees. Something about going to his family home felt significant, like I was crossing another line that took me further from being just a hired date. I was about to see where he grew up, the house where his parents still lived, the place that shaped who he became. My hands felt sweaty and I wiped them on my dress, which was still the same one I'd worn to the wedding even though that felt like days ago instead of just last night. Kobe pulled into the driveway of a 2-story house with blue shutters and a well-maintained lawn. We walked up to the front door and he unlocked it with his key. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and something baking, probably from yesterday before everything happened. Family photos covered the walls in the hallway, and I could see Kobe at different ages, his school pictures showing him with braces and bad haircuts that made me want to smile. We went upstairs to his parents' bedroom to get the items his mom requested. I waited in the hallway while Kobe gathered things from their room, and I found myself looking at more photos on the wall. One showed Kobe in a cap and gown at his college graduation, standing between his parents with the biggest smile on his face. His dad had his arm around Kobe's shoulders and looked so proud. Kobe came out of the bedroom carrying a small bag and caught me staring at the photo. His face changed and he set the bag down, moving closer to look at the picture with me. He pointed to his dad and his voice broke a little when he said he was really scared of losing him. I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there while Kobe kept staring at the photo like he was trying to memorize it. We went back downstairs and Kobe set the bag by the front door. He walked into the living room and sat down on the couch, and I followed him because I didn't know what else to do. The room had comfortable furniture and more photos on the shelves, the kind of lived-in space that felt like a real home. Kobe reached over and took my hand, his fingers wrapping around mine. He thanked me for not running away when any normal person would have left the hospital hours ago. I told him I wasn't sure what I was doing here anymore, that this stopped feeling like a job somewhere between the wedding reception and the hospital waiting room. The words came out before I could stop them, and I felt exposed saying it out loud. Kobe looked at me and admitted he felt the same way during our slow dance at the wedding, that something shifted for him before his mom even called. We sat there holding hands on his parents' couch, and I wondered how we got here, how a fake date turned into whatever this was. My phone started buzzing in my purse and didn't stop. I pulled it out and saw the college group chat exploding with messages. People were asking where I disappeared to during the reception, and if I was okay. Someone said I left in a hurry and looked upset. Another person asked if something happened with my date. I scrolled through the messages feeling sick. Then I saw a separate text from Ruby asking if the guy I brought was real or hired, because Brian was spreading rumors about me. My hands started shaking as I read her message again. Brian was telling people I'd hired someone to be my date. I felt my face get hot and my vision got blurry around the edges. I showed Kobe the messages without saying anything. His face went completely white as he read through them, his jaw getting tight. He handed my phone back and ran his hands through his hair. We both realized at the same time that Brian might expose our arrangement to his family, might call his mom or send her a message about the rental dating app. Kobe said we needed to control the story before someone else did it for us, that we had to tell his mom the truth ourselves. But neither of us knew how to do that while his dad was still in the hospital recovering from surgery. I asked what we were supposed to say, how we could possibly explain this without making his mom hate both of us. Kobe didn't have an answer, and we just sat there in his parents' living room, trying to figure out a way forward that didn't end in complete disaster. We drove back to the hospital with the bag of items his mom requested. The whole ride felt tense and quiet, both of us thinking about Brian and what he might do. When we got to his dad's room, everything looked different. His dad was sitting up in bed eating dinner from a tray, looking so much better than he had earlier. He smiled when he saw us and made a joke about the terrible hospital food. Kobe's mom was sitting in the chair next to the bed looking more relaxed than she had all day. His dad saw me and Kobe holding hands and made a comment about how he was going to be at our wedding someday, that he better get healthy so he could walk me down the aisle since my own dad wasn't in the picture anymore. Kobe's mom laughed and told him not to rush us, that we had plenty of time for all that. I felt like I might throw up right there in the hospital room. The weight of lying to these kind people who were going through such a hard time made my chest hurt. I forced a smile and nodded but couldn't actually form words. Evening came and Kobe's mom insisted we go home and get some rest. She said she was going to stay overnight with her husband, that the nurses had already brought in a cot for her. She walked us to the elevator and hugged Kobe first, holding him tight and telling him his dad was going to be fine. Then she turned to me and pulled me into a hug. whispering in my ear that I was exactly what her son needed. She said she could see how much I cared about him, and how grateful she was that he found someone like me. I hugged her back and felt like the worst person alive, like I was taking advantage of her kindness during the scariest time of her life. When we got in the elevator and the doors closed, I couldn't look at Kobe because I knew if I did, I might start crying. Kobe drove me back to my apartment and we sat in his car outside my building. Neither of us moved to get out. The street was quiet and dark except for the glow from the streetlights. Kobe finally broke the silence and said we should tell his parents the truth tomorrow. Just rip the band-aid off and deal with whatever happened. I agreed, even though the thought of facing his mom after what she'd whispered to me made me want to disappear. I asked him what we were supposed to say, how we could possibly make this okay. He didn't have an answer, and we just sat there in the dark, trying to figure out what to do next. My hand was on the door handle, but I couldn't make myself open it and go inside. Everything felt wrong and complicated, and I didn't know how to fix any of it. Inside my apartment, my roommate was still awake on the couch with her laptop open. She closed it the second she saw my face and got up to put the kettle on without saying anything. I dropped onto the couch and just sat there while she moved around the kitchen making tea like she knew I needed a minute to collect myself. She brought over 2 mugs and sat next to me, waiting. I told her everything about the hospital and Kobe's dad, and how his mom thought we were real, and how his dad squeezed my hand and told me to take care of his son. My roommate listened and sipped her tea and didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she asked me straight out if I had real feelings for Kobe. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't know what to say anymore. The wedding felt like it happened weeks ago instead of just hours. Everything got so twisted up between the fake dating and the real crisis that I couldn't tell what was performance and what was actually me. I went to bed but couldn't sleep. I kept running through different versions of telling Kobe's mom the truth. Every single one sounded awful. I imagined sitting her down in the hospital and explaining that I hired her son to be my fake boyfriend, that we lied to her face, while her husband was in surgery, that nothing about us was real even though I drove him to the hospital and stayed all night. Each version made me sound worse than the last. I stared at my ceiling and wondered if there was any possible way to tell the truth, without looking like a horrible person who took advantage of her kindness during the worst night of her life. The sun started coming up and I still didn't have an answer. My phone buzzed around 8 in the morning with a text from Kobe. His dad had a good night and the doctors were talking about moving him out of ICU soon. I felt relieved reading that, genuinely happy his dad was improving. Then Kobe added that we should wait one more day to tell his mom, let her have this relief without immediately crushing her with the truth. I texted back that I agreed even though I knew we were just making it worse by waiting. Every hour we delayed telling her was another hour of lying, another memory she'd have of us that wasn't real. But I couldn't bring myself to say we should tell her today, not when she was finally getting good news about her husband. Another notification popped up on my phone, this time from the rental app. It was a warning message saying I hadn't completed my post-event survey, and that continued representation beyond contracted events violated their terms of service. I read it 3 times, my stomach sinking with each pass. The app was reminding me that what Kobe and I were doing right now, pretending to be together at the hospital, was against the rules. I took a screenshot of the warning to show Kobe later. It felt like evidence that we were officially in violation of the agreement, proof that we'd crossed a line from professional service into something messier. My phone rang and Ruby's name flashed on the screen. I answered and she didn't even say hello, just asked what was really going on because Brian was telling everyone I hired an escort to the wedding. My heart started racing, but I kept my voice steady. I told her Brian was a liar who wanted to humiliate me and it backfired on him. I didn't confirm or deny what Brian was saying, just kept repeating that he was a jerk who tried to make me look pathetic in front of everyone. Ruby said she believed me and that Brian was being gross about the whole thing, but she also said some people in the friend group were taking his side. I thanked her for calling and hung up, then sat on my bed feeling sick about how this was spreading through my entire social circle. I texted Kobe asking if we could meet at a coffee shop near the hospital before visiting his dad. He agreed and I got dressed and drove over, my hands shaking a little on the steering wheel. We sat in a corner booth with our coffee getting cold between us while we finally talked about what happens after we tell his parents the truth. Kobe said he wanted to ask me on a real date once this was all over, that he wanted to start fresh without the transaction hanging over us. I told him I wanted that too, but I was scared because everything between us was built on a lie from the very beginning. How were we supposed to trust what we felt when we met under such fake circumstances? Kobe reached across the table and took my hand, and I let him, even though I knew it was probably making everything more complicated. His phone rang while we were still holding hands across the table. It was his mom saying his dad was moved to a regular room right now. We left our coffee and rushed to the hospital together. In the elevator going up to the new floor, Kobe reached for my hand again and I let him take it. We both knew we were making this so much harder on ourselves, that every moment we spent acting like a real couple was another moment we'd have to explain away later. But neither of us pulled away. The elevator doors opened and we walked down the hall still holding hands like we couldn't help ourselves. So Kobe's dad looked completely different in the regular room. He was sitting up in bed eating real food from a tray and joking with the nurses about how terrible hospital food was. His color was better and his eyes were focused, and he smiled when he saw us walk in. He started telling us about his rehab plan and how the doctor said he could go home in just a few days if he kept improving. Kobe's mom was crying, but they were happy tears this time, relief pouring out of her after the terror of the last 24 hours. I stood there watching them and thought maybe we could finally tell them the truth now that the crisis had passed, now that everyone could breathe again without the immediate fear. But then Kobe's dad turned to me and started asking questions about my family and my job. He wanted to get to know me better, to understand who his son was dating. I answered honestly about my life and my work, carefully dancing around anything about how Kobe and I actually met. I talked about my roommate and my apartment and my job without mentioning the wedding or the rental app or any of the real story. Each question felt like another lie piling on top of all the others. I could see Kobe next to me struggling with the same guilt, his jaw tight as he listened to me answer his dad's questions with partial truths and careful omissions. That evening back at my apartment, someone knocked on my door. I opened it and Elliot was standing there looking worried. He said he'd been concerned after I disappeared from the wedding reception without saying goodbye to anyone. I let him inside and everything just came pouring out. I told him about hiring Kobe and the hospital emergency, and the lie to his family, and how it kept getting bigger and more impossible to fix. Elliot sat on my couch and listened to the whole mess without judging me once. When I finished, he said I needed to tell the truth soon before it got even worse, that every day I waited was just going to make the eventual confession more painful for everyone involved. I woke up the next morning to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I grabbed it with one eye still closed and saw Brian's name on the screen. The text message made my stomach twist into knots. He'd sent a screenshot from the rental dating app with Kobe's profile clearly visible, his professional headshot and the description about being available for events. Brian's message below it read like poison. He demanded I admit to everyone that I'd hired a fake date because nobody would actually want to be with me. He said he'd always known I was pathetic, but this was a new low even for me. His cruelty reminded me exactly why I'd left him in the first place, why I'd spent 2 years trying to get over someone who treated me like garbage. I forwarded the screenshot and Brian's message to Kobe without thinking twice about it. My phone rang less than a minute later. Kobe's voice came through angry and tight. He said Brian was trying to turn our situation into a weapon, trying to hurt both of us just because his plan to make me feel small had backfired at the wedding. We talked for maybe 5 minutes before we both agreed we needed to tell his parents the truth today, right now, before Brian found some way to contact them directly and make everything worse. Kobe said he'd handle telling his family while I dealt with my friends. We arranged to meet at the hospital in 30 minutes. I threw on jeans and a sweater and drove to the hospital with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Kobe was waiting outside the main entrance when I pulled into the parking lot. We walked inside together without saying much to each other. His mom was sitting beside his dad's bed when we entered the room. His dad looked so much better than yesterday, sitting up and eating breakfast from a tray. Kobe asked his mom if we could talk privately in the family waiting room down the hall. She looked worried right away, her face going tense like she knew something bad was coming. She probably thought we were about to announce a breakup. I wish that's all we had to tell her. We walked down to the small waiting room with uncomfortable chairs and old magazines scattered on a coffee table. Kobe's mom sat down slowly and looked between us with concern in her eyes. Kobe started by saying he was sorry. Then he explained everything from the very beginning. He told her about working for a rental dating service where people hired him to be their date for events. He explained how I'd hired him for my ex's wedding because Brian had invited me specifically to make me feel bad about being single. He admitted we'd only known each other for a few days before showing up at the hospital. His mom's face went through about 5 different expressions in 30 seconds. First, she looked confused, like she didn't understand what he was saying. Then hurt crept into her eyes as she realized we'd lied to her. Finally, anger settled across her features and she turned to look directly at me. She asked if anything about the last 2 days had been real, or if I'd just been playing some kind of game with her family during the worst crisis of their lives. I told her the truth as clearly as I could manage. I said I came to the hospital because I genuinely cared what happened to Kobe and his dad. I explained that staying here overnight and being with them through the surgery wasn't part of any transaction or business arrangement. I admitted that Kobe and I had developed real feelings for each other even though we met under fake circumstances. His mom stared at me for a long moment before asking how she was supposed to believe anything I said when our entire relationship had started as a lie. She said everything she knew about me was based on a story we'd made up, and now she didn't know what was real and what was performance. I didn't have a good answer for that question. I just stood there feeling horrible while she looked at both of us like we'd broken something precious. Kobe's mom said she needed time to process what we'd just told her. She asked us to leave the hospital and let her stay with her husband alone today. Kobe tried to apologize again, his voice cracking as he started to explain, but she held up her hand to stop him. She said she was too hurt to talk about it right now and she needed space to think. We walked out of the hospital room and down the long corridor toward the exit. Neither of us said anything as we passed nurses and other visitors. I felt like we'd just ruined everything good that had happened between us and his family. We made it to the parking lot and sat in Kobe's car without turning on the engine. The silence stretched out between us for what felt like forever. He finally broke it by saying he was sorry for getting me into this whole mess. I told him I was sorry for not leaving when I should have, for staying at the hospital and making the lie bigger instead of walking away that first night. We both admitted out loud that we had genuine feelings for each other, that somewhere between the wedding and the hospital something real had developed. But we also acknowledged that maybe our feelings weren't enough to fix what we'd broken with his family. Maybe starting a relationship on top of such a huge lie meant we were doomed from the beginning. I drove home alone and went straight to my laptop. The rental dating app had a notification waiting for me. I clicked it and found an official warning about policy violations and a request to call their compliance department immediately. I dialed the number with my hands still shaking from the hospital confrontation. A woman answered and asked me to explain the situation. I told her everything about how the wedding date had extended into a family emergency and how we'd continued representing ourselves as a couple beyond the contracted event. The representative listened without interrupting and then explained the consequences. She said I'd face a penalty fee for violating the terms of service. She also said Kobe would likely face suspension from the platform for crossing professional boundaries with a client. I agreed to pay whatever fee they charged and hung up feeling even worse than before. My roommate found me sitting on the couch staring at my phone. She sat down next to me and asked what happened at the hospital. I told her about the confession and Kobe's mom's reaction and the rental app violation. She suggested we draft a message together for the college group chat, something honest that would let me control the narrative before Brian spread more lies. We spent 20 minutes writing and rewriting a short message. In it, I admitted that I'd hired a date for Brian's wedding because I was hurt and wanted to prove I was doing fine without him. I explained that things had gotten complicated when real feelings developed, but that my personal life wasn't Brian's business or anyone else's. I read it over 3 times and then sent it before I could overthink the decision and chicken out. The responses started coming in almost right away. Elliot texted first saying he supported me and understood why I'd made that choice. Ruby sent a message saying she thought it was actually kind of smart, and that Brian had deserved to see me happy. A few other people reacted with surprise but said they understood making a messy human decision when you're hurt. But several people responded with judgment and mockery. Brian sent a string of messages calling me pathetic and saying this proved he was right to leave me. A couple of his friends piled on with similar comments. I watched the messages roll in for about 2 minutes before I muted the entire group chat. I realized I didn't need people in my life who couldn't understand that sometimes you make imperfect choices when you're trying to protect yourself from someone cruel. 2 days crawled by without any messages from Kobe's mom. My phone stayed quiet except for Kobe's updates about his dad's recovery. Short texts that said his father was doing better, but his mom refused to talk about us. I opened the rental app one last time and stared at the penalty fee notification. $500 for violating their terms of service. I transferred the money without hesitation and clicked the button to close my account permanently. Watching that profile disappear felt like shutting a door on the whole mess, putting that chapter behind me for good. My roommate found me on the couch that evening and asked if I was okay. I told her I would be, that I just needed time to figure out what came next. My phone rang 3 days later while I was making dinner. Kobe's name flashed on the screen and my stomach flipped. He asked if I wanted to meet him for dinner, just the 2 of us, no pretending or performing. I agreed before I could talk myself out of it. We picked a quiet restaurant across town, somewhere neither of us had been before. I got there first and sat in a corner booth, my hands shaking as I waited. Kobe walked in looking tired but real, no polished wedding date smile, just himself. He slid into the booth across from me and we both started talking at the same time, then laughed nervously. He went first, telling me he was taking a break from the rental dating service. He said the situation with his family made him realize he'd been using the job to avoid real connection, to perform intimacy instead of risking actual feelings. I admitted I hired him because I was scared of being vulnerable, of letting people see that Brian had hurt me and left me alone. We both sat there acknowledging we had work to do on ourselves, that maybe we'd been hiding from real life in different ways. The waiter brought our food, but neither of us ate much. We kept talking about what we wanted, whether we could build something real from such a broken foundation. Kobe reached across the table but stopped short of taking my hand. He said he wanted to try, but only if we did it right this time. I told him I wanted the same thing, but I was terrified of rushing into something built on lies and hospital emergencies. We agreed to take things slow, to start as friends, and see if what we felt during those intense days was real, or just manufactured by the circumstances. After dinner, Kobe walked me to my car in the parking lot. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before he pulled me into a hug. It felt completely different from the performance at the wedding, more tentative but more honest. I drove home feeling confused and hopeful at the same time. A week passed before Kobe texted again. His message said his dad was home from the hospital and doing well in physical therapy. He added that his mom was still hurt, but she'd asked if I was okay, which he took as a small sign that she might forgive us eventually. I texted back that I hoped so because I genuinely liked her, even though I'd only known her for one terrible night. The next afternoon, Ruby called and asked if I wanted to grab coffee. We met at our usual spot near campus, and she didn't waste time getting to the point. She told me the friend group was basically splitting down the middle. Some people were staying loyal to Brian and his version of events. Others recognized that what I did wasn't that bad, that Brian had tried to humiliate me first, and I just tried to protect myself. Ruby said she was firmly on my side, that Brian was a jerk who got exactly what he deserved. Her support meant more than I expected, and I felt my eyes getting wet as I thanked her. She waved it off and said real friends don't abandon you for making messy human decisions. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about everything except Brian and the wedding, and it felt normal in a way nothing had felt normal in weeks. I made an appointment with a therapist the following Monday. Sitting in that office felt strange at first, admitting out loud that I needed help working through my feelings about Brian, the wedding, Kobe's family, and my own tendency to build walls around myself. The therapist listened to the whole story without judgment. Then she pointed out that hiring a fake date was a symptom of not believing I was enough on my own, that I'd needed external validation to feel worthy of showing up to that wedding. The observation hit harder than I expected, and I realized I had deeper work to do than just figuring out my feelings for Kobe. Over the next few weeks, Kobe and I fell into a pattern of meeting for coffee once a week. They were casual friend dates where we talked about our lives without the pressure of romance or performance. I told him about therapy and what I was learning about myself. He shared that he'd been thinking about why he took a job where he performed intimacy instead of risking real relationships. We both appreciated the honesty, the way we could be vulnerable without pretending everything was fine. 3 weeks after the hospital incident, my phone buzzed with a text from Kobe that made my heart race. His mom wanted to meet me for lunch, just the two of us. I stared at the message for a full minute before responding that I would be there. The terror set in immediately. I called my roommate and told her about the lunch invitation, and she helped me pick out an outfit that looked respectful, but not like I was trying too hard. The morning of the lunch, I changed clothes 3 times and showed up at the restaurant 10 minutes early. I sat at the table Kobe's mom had reserved, my hands twisting in my lap as I waited. She walked in looking composed and serious, and I stood up too quickly, nearly knocking over my water glass. She sat down across from me and ordered tea before turning her full attention my way. I braced myself for her to tell me to stay away from her son, to never contact their family again. Instead, she said she'd been thinking a lot about what happened. She admitted she was still hurt by the deception, that learning the truth had felt like a betrayal during an already horrible time. But then she said something that surprised me. She told me she'd seen something real in how I cared for Kobe during the crisis, in how I stayed at the hospital and held her hand. She asked me directly if my feelings for her son were genuine now, and I felt my throat tighten. I told her honestly that I was trying to figure that out, that I wanted to do this right if we did it at all. I explained that Kobe and I were taking things slow, starting as friends, trying to build something real instead of rushing into a relationship built on lies. She studied my face for a long moment before nodding slowly. She said she appreciated my honesty, that it meant more than I probably realized. She told me she'd support us if we decided to try dating for real, but we had to promise her no more lies. I promised right away, and she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. The warmth of her grip made me feel like maybe I hadn't completely destroyed this chance with his family. We finished lunch talking about normal things like her book club and my job, and when we hugged goodbye in the parking lot, she held on a few seconds longer than expected. That weekend, Elliot texted asking if I wanted to come over for a small get-together at his place. He mentioned Ruby and Baker would be there, the friends who'd stuck by me after the whole truth came out. I showed up Saturday afternoon with a bottle of wine, and the 3 of them were already on Elliot's back deck grilling burgers. Nobody mentioned Brian once during the entire afternoon. We played cards and told stupid stories from college, and it felt easy in a way hanging out hadn't felt easy in months. Ruby pulled me aside while the guys argued over the grill and told me she was proud of me for being honest even when it was hard. I realized right then that I was building something smaller but way more real than that big college friend group, and it felt right. Kobe picked me up after the gathering ended around 6. We drove to a park near the river where people were walking dogs and kids were playing on the swings. We found a quiet path along the water and started walking. He told me he'd been seeing a therapist too, working through why he took a job where he performed feelings instead of risking real ones. I admitted I was scared of rushing into something built on such a weird foundation, that I didn't want to mess up whatever this could be. He stopped walking and turned to face me, saying he thought we could be good together if we started completely fresh. His hands were in his pockets and he looked nervous in a way I'd never seen during the wedding performance. We agreed to keep taking it slow, to let whatever this was develop naturally without any pressure or performance. He drove me back to my apartment and walked me to my door. When he kissed my cheek, it was sweet and careful, and felt more real than anything that happened at the wedding. My face got warm, and I fumbled with my keys trying to unlock the door. He waited until I was safely inside before heading back to his car. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an email from the rental app. They were confirming my account closure and Kobe's voluntary suspension from the platform. I deleted the email immediately and felt this huge wave of relief wash over me. Whatever happened with Kobe now would be real and chosen, not something either of us got paid for. 2 days later, I stopped at a coffee shop near my apartment to grab an iced latte before work. Brian was standing in line ahead of me. My first instinct was to leave, but I made myself stay. He turned around and saw me, and his face twisted into this mean smile. He started to say something about how pathetic I was, but I cut him off before he could finish. I told him I was done letting him make me feel small, that he'd cheated and lied and tried to hurt me, but it didn't work. I walked away without waiting for his response. My hands were shaking when I got back to my car, but I felt stronger than I did at his wedding, more sure that I deserved better than someone who treated me like that. That weekend, Kobe invited me to volunteer with him at a dog rescue event in the park. He told me it was something he did every month, completely separate from our complicated history. I met his actual rescue dogs, a pit bull named Rosie, and a three-legged terrier named Biscuit. Watching him interact with the dogs and the other volunteers, I saw this version of him that had nothing to do with the polished wedding date. He was patient and kind and genuinely cared about these animals. He introduced me to everyone as his friend, not his girlfriend, and I appreciated that he wasn't rushing to label things. We spent 3 hours helping people fill out adoption applications and walking dogs around the park. Rosie wouldn't leave my side the entire time. On Monday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was Kobe's dad. He thanked me for being there at the hospital, saying he knew the situation had been complicated, but he was grateful I didn't leave his son alone that night. His voice was stronger than it had been in the hospital room. He told me Kobe talked about me all the time, and I admitted that I thought about Kobe a lot too. He laughed this warm, genuine laugh and said he hoped we'd figure it out. After we hung up, I sat on my couch staring at my phone for a solid 10 minutes. My roommate came home from work that evening and found me cooking dinner, actually humming while I chopped vegetables. She pointed out that I seemed happier than I'd been in months, even with all the social drama and complicated feelings about Kobe. I stopped chopping and realized she was right. Working through this whole mess had somehow made me more confident, more willing to be honest about what I wanted and needed. I wasn't hiding behind fake dates or pretending I was fine when I wasn't. The following Friday, Kobe and I had our first official date. Dinner at an Italian place downtown and then a movie, just like normal people do. We held hands during the movie and his palm was slightly sweaty, which made me like him even more. When he drove me home, we sat in his car outside my building talking for over an hour. We talked about our families and our jobs and stupid things like our favorite pizza toppings. It felt both familiar and completely new, like we were finally getting to know each other without a crisis or performance between us. This time there was no emergency, no lie we were maintaining, just two people trying to figure out if they could build something real together. He walked me to my door and the silence between us felt different from it had in the car, heavier somehow, like we both knew something was about to shift. He stopped at my doorstep and turned to face me, his hands in his pockets, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him even at the wedding. He asked if he could kiss me, and I said yes before I could overthink it. The kiss was nothing like the performance at the wedding where everything had been smooth and practiced. This was awkward and tentative, our noses bumping slightly as we figured out the angle, his hand shaking a little when it touched my face. When we pulled apart, we were both smiling like complete idiots, the kind of genuine happiness that you can't fake no matter how good an actor you are. He said goodnight and waited until I was inside before walking back to his car. Over the next few weeks, we fell into an easy rhythm of real dates and honest conversations that felt completely different from our scripted interactions. We went to movies and restaurants, took his dogs to the park, cooked dinner at each other's apartments. We talked about the wedding and the hospital sometimes, acknowledging our weird origin story with a mix of embarrassment and amusement, but mostly we focused on building something new and real. He told me about his childhood and why he started the rental dating service, and I shared about my relationship with Brian and why his wedding had hurt so much. Every conversation felt like peeling back another layer, getting to know the actual person instead of the performance. We had our first real fight about something stupid, him being late to meet my roommate, and we worked through it like adults instead of pretending everything was perfect. 3 weeks into actually dating, Kobe's mom called and invited both of us to a family dinner to celebrate his dad's recovery. My stomach dropped when Kobe told me about the invitation, but he squeezed my hand and reminded me that we were doing this for real now. No more lies. When we walked through their door that evening, I was there as Kobe's actual girlfriend, not a hired actress playing a role. His dad opened the door and immediately pulled me into a hug, whispering in my ear that he knew we'd figure it out, and I felt tears prick my eyes at his acceptance. His mom smiled at us with cautious warmth, not quite the enthusiasm from the hospital, but genuine kindness that I hadn't ruined completely. At dinner, Kobe's dad told the story of how we met at the hospital, joking that it wasn't the most traditional beginning, but sometimes the best relationships start in unexpected places. Kobe and I exchanged a look across the table, sharing the secret of our real beginning at a wedding reception where I'd hired him, and I thought about how some parts of our story would always be just ours to know. His mom asked about our plans and we told her we were taking things slow, building something real, and she nodded with approval. That night, Kobe drove me home and we sat outside my apartment like we'd done so many times now, neither of us in a hurry to end the evening. He told me he was glad I answered his rental profile that day, even though everything that followed was complicated and messy and sometimes painful. I told him I was glad too, that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places, from moments when you're trying to prove something to someone who doesn't matter, and end up finding someone who does. When he kissed me goodnight, it felt like we'd finally arrived somewhere real and right, like all the confusion and lies and hospital waiting rooms had somehow led us exactly where we needed to be. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Nothing too deep, Just another small story from real life. Thanks for listening. It always feels like chatting with an old friend. Come back next time if you want to hang out again.